Hey guys, welcome to the Scholar Online YouTube channel, the channel that is all about learning. If you're new to the channel and if you haven't subscribed yet, please click on the subscribe button at the bottom of the video that you're watching right now. It's that red button over there. Just click on it and turn on the notifications so that you'll be notified every time we produce a new video on this channel. We generally produce new videos on a Wednesday and on a Saturday, and sometimes only once a week. It depends really. Sometimes our videos are very long and we then only produce one video a week instead of two. All right. And if you're new to our channel as well, we always make sure that we give you all the information that you need to follow along with the videos that we produce. So at the bottom of the video, right next to where the description should be, there is a button over there that says shows more. You can click on it and it's going to expand the description. Okay. So if we discuss about, a link or, something that I say to you, I'm going to link it in the description below. You're going to find that link over there. All right. And for every video that we make as well, we have timestamps to help you navigate through our content a little bit better. As you can see, a lot of our videos are very, very long because we explain all of our concepts in great detail. Okay. So instead of watching the entire 3-hour video, you can just read through the timestamp and figure out which part of the video you want to see. Of course, you're welcome to watch the entire video, but if, for example, you're coming back and you wanted to remind yourself of something, you can use the timestamp. Okay. The way that timestamps work is if, for example, you want to, figure out, oh, this is how I want to do a tweet with an image, just click on the timestamp over there and it's going to fast forward and take you to that section that is talking about that. Okay. So this helps you navigate through the videos that we're making. Okay. You don't have to watch the entire video. Okay. So on the description as well, we will have links to our YouTube, Instagram, and all of that, so feel free to follow us on social media so that, you can learn more about a Scholar Online. All right. In this video, we are going to go through what are the common interview questions that you would get if you're going for a Python and Django job interview. Okay. So the knowledge that we've been learning in the last couple of weeks and months or so, where we're building a web application in Python and Django, we're going to apply all of that and prepare you for getting enough information to be able to tackle, to go out in the market, in the field out there, and perhaps apply for a junior developer for web applications. All right. So let's get started. The first question would be, what is Django? And this is common. You would get a question like this, okay? And the way to answer this is, Django is an open source web application framework that is written in Python, okay? So what's important to mention here is that it's open source and it is a web application framework. And over here, you can even mention that there are other types of web application frameworks like Flask, like Bottle, and there's a couple of them. There's more than, there's a lot of them that you can use, all right? And then you can mention that Django is just one of those. It's definitely the most commonly used, but it's one of many. All right. And then after that, maybe you'll get a question around, where did Django come from? And if you have a little bit of history around the origins of Python and Django, okay? And here you can mention that Python was initially created, Django was initially created by two people, Adrian Holovati and Simon Wilson. Okay, they were working for a company called Lawrence Journal World, and they were building a web application for them. And then they learned that, actually, a lot of these things are standardized, and perhaps we can build a framework around this where we can even roll this out to to everybody to be able to use to simplify, the process of web application. So Django was really created to simplify a web application's a web developer's journey when they're going around the process of creating an app. Okay, it takes a lot of the common boilerplate code that you would have to write, and it sort of standardizes it so that you would only focus on the specific applications that you're building your web app for. And you've seen, if you've looked at our tutorial series, how simplistic it was to just do a simple application, because a lot of the boilerplate coding you would be doing if you're using even something like Flask, for example, is done for you automatically with Django. Okay, so that's why it was created. It was created to simplify the process of creating web applications and standardize a lot of the, the common things that you will do from app to app. You standardize it so that, you can, use one framework to do all of that for you in the backend. Okay. So Django was named after a guy that's called Django Reinhardt. He was a guitarist, I think, from the 1930s, and considered one of the best guitarists that have ever been. Definitely Adrian Holovati and the guy that created Django believed that he was one of the best guitarists that ever lived, and one of their favorite. And definitely they named this Django web application framework that they're building after the guy Django Reinhardt. Okay, in 2008, they created a Django Software Foundation, all right, that has now taken over maintaining the Django framework, and they have been responsible since 2008 up to today to keep it up to date. Okay. And they've done a great job because I've used a lot of applications. I've used a lot of frameworks, and I can tell you, and this is a common knowledge in the industry, and everybody will tell you, Django documentation is one of the best, well-maintained, one of the best, well written, even for a beginner to understand and go through it. Okay, it is really well written, it's well maintained, and these guys have done a great job from the Software Foundation. All right, and you can go and visit the official website at djangoproject.com and just have a look at what I'm talking about. But you've seen snippets of this, a documentation if you have been following along with us in this tutorial series. Okay. So another question is, perhaps they might ask you, and this comes up a lot, can you give us examples of applications or real life websites that have been built in Django? Lucky for you, there's actually a lot of them, okay? Some of the really complex apps, have been built in Django because Django is really good with scaling, all right? You can build like professional apps that you can scale up very, very easily on Django. That is why a lot of real life applications are built on it, all right? Django is good with SEO, and it's just built perfectly for doing for web applications. So you can give examples like Instagram, right? Spotify, Dropbox, even this YouTube right now that you're watching, that's on Django. Okay, it's running off of Django. YouTube was initially built on PHP, I think, early days, and then they upgraded it to Django. When with a lot of the algorithms that they're running and a lot of the things. So Django really allows you to also, incorporate a lot of the Python libraries, and analyzing data, big data, because Django is also very good with big data stuff. Okay, and if you're doing a whole web app in Python, you have access to all the other Python libraries that you can sort of build into that, and I think that is why a lot of the big scalable web applications are running off of Django today. I've read it, Discuss, NASA, Spotify, I've mentioned that already, Dropbox. So there's a lot, and this is just a short list. I mean, you can Google on the internet right now, and you're gonna get a list. Some articles with up to 30 really common websites that have been built. I mean, popular websites that have been built off of Django. So Django is really widely used in the industry. And as a web developer, learning a new web development framework, Django is a good one to learn because you can work anyway, right? Because a lot of people are using it. And then this is a common question. What are the features of Django? What are those things that make Django unique? That you can use to describe Django very well. Okay, so number one, I wouldn't say it's easy to learn. That's why I have easy in question marks, because easy is relative, okay? How easy is it to learn? I mean, honestly speaking, something like Flask is easier to learn than Django. But the reason why I say Django is easy is because of the very well-written documentation, okay? So if you wanted to learn Django, for example, you go off the website, you'd get code for just about anything. There's a lot of online tutorials on it because it's so commonly used. You get information everywhere. You go to Medium, there are so many articles on it. And when you get stuck, and you go to, Stack Overflow, whatever, and you look for questions over there, you Google questions, you're going to find 10, 20 different people asking the same question. Even if you just copy and paste the error message you're getting and put it over the internet, you're going to have so many people that are answering it. Because it's so widely used, as a new beginner learning it, it's easy to find information. So it's not easy in terms of it's simple, but it is easier in terms of it. There's a lot of information for you to help you learn it, in the sense that you can grow your abilities in that very well. Okay, SEO optimized. Okay, so the SEO behind it's built for SEO. Because it's built for web applications, so it really it works well with search engines and crawlers and everything, and the way the server side rendering of the information into the templating, the way it all works, the crawlers can find the information very, very easily and read your web application very well, which helps with with the ranking and a whole lot of other things there. Okay. Scalability. This is an important one. If you look at the previous slide, we had a look at these big, companies that have built the applications in Django. Clearly, even if you're starting off and you're just starting with a small app, you can do a small app in Django as well. But if your app grew and suddenly had 1 million users, and so forth, you can scale the same code that you written the first time when you were starting with just 100 users, okay? So it's easy. You won't have to change frameworks all the time, because so many people that started on PHP and then their app grows like your YouTube's, and then suddenly, oh no, gotta move to Django because even Flask, after a while, it can't handle big data and a whole lot of other a lot of users at the same time, okay? And the security. So this is important, okay? because Django is sort of like has been built using best practices. It has also been built using best practices with respect to security. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Something like a CSRF token, all right, where in other web application frameworks like Flask, for example, you would have to manually get that library, code that in, and make sure that you include it. So that means you need to know that you need to include it. And if you didn't know that you needed to do that, you might not do it, okay? And then your app will be less secure. But within Django, a lot of those things, because best practices were used when developing the framework, were by some of the best web developers in the world. Some of the biggest companies are running on Django. Even if you, as a small developer, starting a small web app using the framework, it comes in with all of that stuff built in already, making your application one of the most secure, actually, even from the beginning, all right? And accelerated development, it's easy to go from zero to hero, okay? Zero to hero, you can build a web application in like a weekend because everything is done for you. You just have to focus on your specific tasks and your front end and your other things. So it makes it easier for people to go from zero to hero because it's like one of what they call battery included. Okay, it's one of those battery included. Everything is in there. Everything you need is already sort of included in it. It's sort of like plug and play. All right, you don't have to write the boilerplate for the individual items that would typically go into another web app. All right. So let's continue. Okay, Django admin. Okay, so Django admin comes together with with Django, all right, and I'm talking specifically the admin backend, all right, and this is another feature that you can mention even in the previous slide, that Django comes pre-built out of the box with an admin front end, and you've seen our tutorial series. As soon as you build your app the first time, you can immediately go and log into the admin panel, all right? And on the admin panel, you have the abilities to perform CRUD operations. You can create, read, update, delete data directly from the back end. So this also helps with a lot of developer functions testing, So if you were like building an app and before you build the front end and a form where you would enter the information into the app, you can actually do all of this in the back end and the admin panel, and then view the data in the front end. So it also helps development, but it also helps with clients. So like yesterday I had a client that wanted to, how can I visualize the data in the database? And we didn't build that application in Django because that wasn't a requirement at the beginning. But later, when your app is running, you realize, actually, I want to see what is in the database, okay? So typically, with a normal web application process, you would go into the process of building an admin backend. You would build it manually. You would build a different standalone website that you would call an admin backend that would have login and everything so that people can log in there. And then from there, you would have functions where people can visualize, create, read, whatever the data. And the sort of the way it would look different from the front end because it would be designed for maybe the owner of the website or the admin of that company, so that they can see everything that's in there. They can manually delete people, add people themselves. So Django comes with that. All right, but if you use other types of frameworks, you wouldn't have that. You would have to create those yourself. So that's another really nice feature of it. But that is what the admin backend is. If they ask you about, what is Django admin, all right, and this really helps save development costs to have that built, out of the box with Django, right? And then there might be a question around code reusability, because you hear this a lot, right? Code reusability, Django, they'll tell you that, you can copy and paste code because apps are sort of standalone and you can take one app. How would you do that? You'll get that question. This is a common question, right? And the way you answer this question is you need to understand the sort of the high level architecture of how a Django application is built, okay? And we did this in the tutorial series where we created a project initially, a Django project. After you create a Django project, then you create a Django applications. Remember when we were creating create app, we had the users app, we had the jobs app, you have different apps, okay? Those apps, technically, the way they're built in a way that you would be able to, copy and paste that entire app folder, right? Copy it and put it in another Django project, right? Because everything would just connect back to the project folder. Your views, your URLs, as long as within the project folder you have the URL included, and you include the URL within your app, all right? You can take that app and put it in a different Django project, and it will be plug and play. And that app would come with its templates, it would come with its view functions, with its admin file, it's whatever, So it was created that way, that you would be able to have code reusability. You'd have to like sort of replicate code between projects, and you could have multiple Django projects and multiple Django apps that you can just sort of plug and play. And if you had a big web development company, for example, you might develop these applications separately some way, and then when a client comes and says, I need an app for this, and then you like figure out, does it need a user authentication? Does it need blogs? And then you can just take your blog app, your user's app, you've written it in a sort of like plug and play way, and just plug those into your whatever app, and boom, the only thing you have to change perhaps is the front end, or you make the front end look different, the templates, all right. But what I'm saying is that the functionality inside the writing of the views and the models and a lot of that, can be the same, and all just sits in one folder. Whereas in something like Flask, for example, everything is like in one file or whatever, and it's not as easy to plug and play. I mean, you can, if you knew you wanted to do that, you could write your code that way, but Django is built that way. That's what I'm saying. So that is what code reusability in Django would mean if they would ask you such a question, all right? And then another one is, they'll use terms like, and this gets used, like Django is sometimes called a loosely coupled framework. What does that mean? So the example that I gave you before, you can add that because it's loosely coupled. You can sort of move things around. But more importantly, for this question specifically, you want to talk about, the full stack a part of building a web app. You've got the front end and you've got the back end, all right? So Django it's not as coupled as other frameworks in the sense that, the back end developers can work completely independent from the front end developers, all right? Because I don't need to know what the template is going to look like when I'm building the back end, all right? Because for example, all I need to know is I'm building a view for a detailed view, or I'm building a view for a list view, or I'm building a view for, what is it, a combined list detailed view, for example, something that maybe has a column on the side, So if I know that I'm building a view for a detailed view, all I need is to supply the object variable or the object, dict, in the context. And then the front-end developer just needs to know this thing is going to be called object, so I need to just slot it in where it needs to go when they're building their front end and how the front end is going to look. So you can completely decouple your back end and your front end, and you can have the developers work completely separately because there's structure in how the app is built. So much so that, and we did a little bit of this earlier on, where you even have where you have the class-based view. If you look at how the class-based view works, all right, the class-based view, the way it works, it justifies or helps you understand this question specifically, because you could write all of that and then it doesn't matter what the HTML looks like, okay? The HTML can look whichever way it looks like, all right? But the back end, you design it the way that you want, and you can completely decouple those two things, all right? Then this is an important question because you need to understand the settings file and what goes into the settings file. So there's many ways that this question might be asked. What is the significance of the settings files? Can you tell us a little bit more about the the Django settings files? What's included in the settings file? What do you need to watch out for in the settings file? So there's many variations of this question, but really they want to know, do you understand what goes into the settings of a Django application? Okay, this is very, very crucial for anybody, all right? So the first thing, okay, the location of the settings file is always usually inside of the project directory, okay? So it's not in the root of the app, it's going to be inside of the project directory. You will have a directory for the project, all right? And inside of the project directory, you will have the file in there. And what you need to include in there is definitely your database settings. So overall, the settings file, saves and stores the settings of a specific project, okay? So you need to include what type of database you're using, whether you're using the normal basic one, all that information is going to be saved in there. The location of where your templates are going to be, you're going to save that in there. The static files and, how the static files are going to be managed, and the location of the static file. If your application has got email capabilities, your email settings are going to be set in there. So basically, whatever features that your app has that has got sort of like either credentials, login credentials, or configuration elements that are required. Even when you install plugins and you install other libraries that have settings. Okay, like for example, we didn't do it in this project, but you get plugins like an HTML plugin where you're able to replace all of your text views with HTML views, where people can actually type HTML instead of HTML instead of typing it in text format, so that you can have like rich text that is saved inside of your database. That kind of a plugin, for example, has settings and it has configuration elements. Usually those configuration elements will be also described inside of the settings file. So there's a lot of elements that you need to save in there. But also project app registry. So this is also important. Probably I should have had it as the first item of this list. Every time you create a new project, you need to record it inside of the settings.py. So if you were like doing the plug and play and removing a project from one project to another, removing an app from one project to another, every time you would register an app into a different project, you have to include that in the settings file, because when Django runs initially, the first thing it does when you run server, it goes through its settings file to go through all the configuration elements in there, okay? So if, for example, an app is not registered in the settings file, Django is not going to be able to find it. So all of those configuration elements are saved inside of the settings files. So that is the significance, and that's how you explain this type of a question, all right? And then this one, you are definitely going to get this question, okay? Describe the Django project architecture and how the Django app is built, okay? There are two types of how this question would be asked. The first, you might get a question that says, can you describe the folder structure, okay? And the folder structure per se is not, well, it's related, but not exactly, okay? Folder structure is just explain where all the folders are, okay? And this is very easy, Just go and create a Django project and figure out where the folders are, and then learn and cram that, and then answer that question. You just have to name the folders, this folder, that folder, that folder. That's it, right? And from a high level, though, when you create a Django project, the first thing you do is you create a project. And when you create a project, it will create for you a project directory. And then inside the project directory, the first thing is the settings of a file, but then there'll be other files inside of the project directory, including your URLs and all sort of things. So the URL file of the project directory is the first port of URL that Django looks at when it tries to find the routings inside of your application. Even if you have other small apps that you've built, they will have to start from the project directory URLs folder. So that is the main one, right? Then after the project directory as a whole, you can create separate standalone applications. And each and every single application that you build has to be connected to the project directory by being registered inside of the settings file. But also, if you want to do your URLs file separately inside of the apps, then you have to sort of refer to those URLs from the main project app URL, okay? So the applications are standalone plugins that go into the high-level project directory, and then the project directory encompasses all the different apps that you might build. You might have a users app, a blogs app, jobs app, whatever app that describes a certain different part of your entire web application, okay? So that is a project level architecture from a directory point of view. But what I'm explaining now is within an application itself, what is the Django architecture, okay? So once you've described what I've explained now, then you're going to go now into the even greater detail within a project application. This is the architecture, okay? Generally, you'll have a model file and you'll have a view file, okay? And the models and the views talk to each other, okay? The model file is where you describe all your data. You describe how your data is structured, how the data goes into the database, and how the data is being organized, okay? So this follows what they call a model view template, okay? So you start with the model first, you go to the view, then you go to the template, okay? Model view template. So the model is the foundation. All right. So you have to, for example, let's say a model of a person. A person has a name, a surname, da 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 da. Those are features of the class of a person. You have to describe the data first, because that explains how everything fits into the database. Then when you go into the view, what the view file does is that it first of all talks to the model, it talks to the database and how the data is saved, but it processes the logic that goes into displaying the data to the front end to the user, okay? So it talks to the template, but it also talks to the model, and the logic in how all of that is covered is saved inside of the model view, all right? And then the template obviously is like your HTML. That's the one that sort of processes that information to the user. That is why in a website like like Facebook, for example, even though Facebook is not built in Django, let me give Instagram, for example, okay? Instagram that's built in Django, a user will come and log into their own profile, okay? So they will make a request from the front end, okay? So the user that makes the request from the front end, they'll go to a specific URL that says, show me my profile, or Instagram dot whatever my username, let's say that's the URL, okay? That URL gets processed into by the view function, okay? So instead of the view function, you'll write the logic of this is the URL, and inside the URL you'll have information, like arguments. Instead of the URL, it will tell you this is the specific user name that we want to find the user profile for. So that argument will be sent to the database. The view function will do a database query. Please give me from our users table. I want you to give me a user that has the username Scholar Online, and then the database and that is structured from the model file. The database will then bring back that information, and then it will be the user profile, and then maybe it will say, give me all the tweets. I mean, all the profiles that this user has done. Give me all the images that they've uploaded. Give me all the whatevers, and then all that information is processed inside of the view function. The view function does all the logic. It sends that information off, and then it structures that information and sends it back to the template via the context, and then displays it to the user. All right. But then if the user Scholar Online made the exact same request, they will only get Scholar Online information. But if another user, I don't know, Tabombeki, had made the same request, they would get their profile information. So the view function is the one that manages what information is getting sent from the database. Okay, if I'm Scholar Online, it's gonna ask for Scholar Online information. If I'm Tabombeki, it's gonna ask for Tabombeki information. So the view function processes all of that logic, okay, and then brings it forward to the template. The template is only displaying. The template only sort of makes a request, and then it gets sent data back, and it displays that data. All right. The model and the database is just sitting there with all of that information. It's waiting for a query, and then it sends back information based on the query that it gets. But the queries and all of that all get processed inside of the view function. Okay, go through our tutorial and get more information about this and specific examples. This will help you to answer this question with respect to the Django architecture. Okay, and then they will then give you, ask you maybe for examples, and some of these technical questions I'm not going to go through in the presentation because, you'll get a different question depending on what interview you go to. So they will ask you generic high-level questions like what I've already covered, but then it's very likely that if it's a specific Django interview, they will ask you technical questions. Give me an example of a model. Give me an example of a view function. Give me an example of how you would talk to the template. You have to know all those things. And there's only way you're going to know those things is by practicing building Django tutorials, okay? So I would refer you to we've done probably now got more than 10 hours if I'm not mistaken. We have more than 11 lectures on Django where we're building a web application for job search, and it's a very complex application that we're building. It's not your standard blogging app, so it has a lot of the features that you would get asked inside of a Django interview. You have to do the work, okay? You have to go through all of that and figure, and the more you practice, the more you'll be able to ask. So if somebody asks you, give me an example of a model, how a model file would look like, what would you import into a model file, you have to know those things, and you don't know what they would ask in a specific interview. So you have to practice everything, okay? And they might ask a question again, how is data inside of a Django app stored, all right? So Django comes shipped with, SQLite database, okay? But the app that we built inside of this tutorial, we didn't use SQLite. We actually installed our own Postgres database, which is actually sort of production ready, so that when it was time to deploy, we didn't have to go through and figure out and do it later, right? We did it right from the beginning, because if you know that you're building an application that is ready to that's going to be deployed anyway, you might as well just get the Postgres database from the beginning, okay? It's not that complicated to do, and we did it in this tutorial, okay? So you would create the database outside of the Django application, install it inside of your machine, wherever it is, create a username, create a database, create all of that information, and then you would load those credentials inside of your settings.py file, so that when Django server runs, it's going to use those credentials to log into the database to access that information, okay? Then how you're going to decide the models or the data sets and that goes into the database is through the model files. Okay, inside of the model file, you'll see you have to specify what is the type of data. Is it going to be a string? Is it going to be an integer? Is it going to be a double? If it's a string, you're going to use a character field. If it's a double, you give a double field. If it's a a boolean, is going to boolean field. So the way SQL databases work is that you have to describe the data set, the type of data set, even the length, the maximum length. You have to describe all those things when you're creating the table. Okay, and we do that inside of our model file. All right, and after that, to write and read data directly, that comes from the view functions. Okay, so the type of database, you have to explain all of that. How does the data gets written into the database is Django does that for you in the back end, but you have to describe the data sets inside of your model files, even the character types, even the data type, even the table, columns, what are all the columns, what are all the variables that are going to go. You have to do all of that inside of your models file, all right? And then they might ask you around static file management. Okay, this is very important when it comes to Django applications because you have like your typical variable files like your templates and your view files and all of those files you're working with all the time. But then every web application has like a JavaScript code. This is front end stuff. Your JavaScript code, your CSS files and all of that, they have to be saved in a place that Django can find them, even though they are front-end things. As the back-end developer, you're probably going to have to assist your front-end developer. They might give you these files and say, okay, you have to place these CSS files where they need to go. So you have to understand that they go into the static folder. Then inside of your settings file, you're gonna have to tell Django where your static folder is. Okay, like any job interview, you're gonna get to a section where they're going to start asking technical questions. And like I've already mentioned, for this specific one, it's very complicated to try and describe each and every single question that you're going to get, okay? And the best way to go around this is to practice. Practice makes perfect, okay? In this tutorial series that we've just done for you with Django, you should be able to, if you complete all the lectures, understand a lot of the technical elements of, writing a Django application, okay? And then I need you to use that and start creating practice applications. You don't have to wait for a job interview before you start building, okay? I mean, when I started developing, I created a lot of my own web applications on the side just to practice how to do things, okay? Whatever I was learning, whether it was web development, app development, or whatever, I did my own projects before being asked by anybody to do it, okay? So all you need is just get a DigitalOcean droplet, okay? Pay $5 a month, invest a little bit of money in it, and start building some stuff, okay? Some examples of things you can work on. A personal blogging application. If you've done this tutorial series that I've shown you, which is way more complicated than a blogging app, you should be able to do a blogging application in a weekend, okay? Do it yourself from scratch, where you're not following a specific video, where you're trying to apply the things you've learned in this video in something that I haven't taught you. There was a specific reason why I didn't cover blogging in this tutorial series, and I tried to avoid it because I wanted to be able to look at this tutorial and apply what you've learned in building a completely different concept. And blogging is the easiest one, okay? Try building your own personal blogging app using Django, all right? And then deploy it, let it be your own, try and build a a resume, an online resume in Django. There's a lot of templates for doing like a profile website for yourself, where you can have a picture of yourself, some projects you've done. This is one of the best starting out portfolio projects that you can do, okay? So create something like that and include blogging in it and do it in Django, and then have it available as something that you can showcase as a portfolio, because a lot of the times in these interviews, they will ask you for a project portfolio, and this is the best one. This is one of the ones that you can do, okay? And you can build your project portfolio, and then you can load it up on GitHub. I haven't shown you how to do that, but that's the easy part, okay? You can Google that, search that on YouTube, load it up on GitHub, and then show your code to other developers and help you out. But also you'll be able to showcase this in an interview. At least you'll have a portfolio to show for it, because that question always comes: show us your project portfolio. Okay, start by doing something like this. Another thing you can do is a family image gallery app, okay, because you're going to find another thing that you want is you want people to interact with the application that you're building. If you want to showcase in the interview that you understand the concepts of creating user profiles and that you build an application that has that working, okay, build a family image gallery app for you and your family and your mother and people around the family. When you go on holidays, whatever it is you do as a family, people can take pictures and then they can upload it inside of the app, and then other people can view, sort of like Facebook. They can comment on the pictures or whatever. Do that, okay? It'll teach you. You will go through image processing, because you might have to do a little bit of image processing in that to get your images right for displaying on a web application. You might have to do a little bit more on models to create, a model for, for the pictures, a model for maybe the comments, if you feel like want to comment on it, a model for the profile, which you've already covered, and log in, log out, so that you can associate a picture to a user. Every time somebody loads a picture, you know who uploaded that picture, you know who's commenting, you can show their name if they're commenting and things like that. Try building an application like that. You have enough knowledge from this tutorial series to do such an application, okay? Document storage. This is one of the first apps I built off of Python, okay? Document storage, okay? Because this is actually a very useful skill to have inside of your resume, because a lot of companies want to have their own back end, sort of Dropbox, because nowadays everybody's moving to the cloud. People are working from home, all right? So imagine a team has, a team in a company has somebody that works in, one part of the country, somebody works at home or whatever, and they want to share documents between each other, and they don't want to email documents all the time. Can you build an online application where I can just upload the document, all right, in there, like in the cloud, and then my colleague can log in, and then you can manage access rights. Who has access to what? Who has read-write access? Who can edit a document? And then your colleague from home can just like go onto the same online platform, check all the documents that have been downloaded, be able to download a document, work on it, re-upload it, and then the colleague somewhere else can see it. Can you do something like this? This type of skill is needed by the majority of small businesses that come across. They want to get away from Dropbox, because after a while Dropbox becomes expensive. All right, then nobody wants to work with Google Docs, because Google Docs, the big elephant in the room with Google and privacy and all of that. So some companies might have specific client documents that have to be kept, private, that they can't just put on Dropbox, and they can't just put on third-party platforms that they don't control how the data is created. Because if you think about these third-party platforms, they've got all the terms and conditions that are 300 pages long. And if I'm like a serious company and I know that my client information is proprietary, I'm not going to put it on Dropbox. I'm going to want somebody to design for me my own document management system, okay? So you can start creating this very easily. It's actually very simple to do in Django, okay? Put that in your portfolio. Create one for you and your friends, and then practice how to do something like this, because if you have something like this in your portfolio, this is very useful for Django, okay? And then the last one is a WhatsApp clone, okay? This is chat, because you get a lot of small companies that also want like an intranet. I get a lot of this type of requests sometimes. They want an intranet. They just want like a back end, a website where people within the company can talk, okay? They don't want to use Facebook. They don't want to use Instagram to talk, because they don't want the stuff that they're talking about to be public, because the moment you use Facebook, everybody can see it, okay? They want to create their own their own company intranet, okay? And some of the off-the-shelf intranet apps are expensive. They've got all these monthly payments, they cost millions, they develop, in a small company that only has maybe 20 employees, a small company with like 30 employees is not going to go and install a CMS from what you call like from Salesforce to manage all of this, because and pay like hundreds of thousands a month. They just want something simple. We just want to be able to chat between each other, and keep record of what we're saying. We want to have like our own platform where the records are kept, and we remember what it is we talked about. We share documents over there with each other. Maybe you can combine this with the document storage, and then we sort of like, if something is up, like the message pops up on someone's computer, they get a notification, and then they're like, yeah, if someone is working from home and they wanted to chat to you, whatever. Build something like this. You can build this in Django very, very easily, okay? So once you understand the concepts and the basic understanding of how Django works, okay, you can do this in like 2 to 3 months, build all these applications, okay, and put them in your portfolio. Have minimum 5 projects in your portfolio that you can showcase. And if you can go into an interview, even if you got the majority of the questions wrong, like some of the detailed technical questions, even if you got all of those, and you forgot, how to write a function for this, right, which is very specific, and then comes project portfolio and you showcase this type of projects, and you say, no, I've built a blogging app, I've built a gallery, I've done this document storage, I've done this, company intranet, I've done this. I'm telling you, you will turn that interview around if you have a decent project portfolio. All right. And a project portfolio doesn't have to be a project done for a client. Luckily, with programming, you just have to be able to demonstrate this is a URL, go check it out, log in and see how it works. And if they can go in there and have a look at it and see it works well, it's not crashing, they'll be like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Oh, you know how to do web apps. You've developed this. This is nice. And to back up your claim, have the source code inside of something like GitHub. And then because maybe they want to make sure that you wrote that code, you can like, no, I have the source code in GitHub. Go over there, open it up, take them to the source code so that you can demonstrate and show that you built that. You didn't just copy somebody else's code, all right? So this question, I thought twice about whether or not I wanted to include it because, basically you're going for a Django interview, you're not going for a Flask interview. But it came up a lot in my research is, how does Django compare to Flask? Okay, Flask and Django are the two most commonly used web application frameworks of Python. Okay, and they're very similar, but not exactly. All right, and I'm going to give you some very high level differences. The number one, main difference between Django and Flask is that you could say Django is like a batteries included, framework, which means it has just about everything that you need. Okay, to create a web application, including the best practices. All right. Whereas a Flask on the other side, it's sort of like it's very lightweight, skeletal in nature, and you as a developer are going to have to decide what elements that you require. If you need a database, you can even use any database that you want. What I like about Flask sometimes, and I really don't like working with SQL, and I want to work with like maybe Rethink or MongoDB, then I'll go for Flask because then I can choose the database that I want to work with. So that's the main top high level difference, is that Flask is very lightweight, skeletal in nature, whereas Django on the other side is battery included. It's got everything that you need. It's all the boilerplate coding to build a web application, including the admin backend is included for you. Okay, so let's go through the points one by one. Right? They are both open source web development frameworks, okay? That's the similarity. Django comes with more built-in functionality for web development, okay? Like the admin palette databases. A lot of the, Django comes with that, it's included, all right? Whereas on the other side, Flask doesn't have all of that. And then people tend to think, oh, Flask is simpler, it's easier. If you're learning, maybe learn Flask first. I tend to disagree, okay? Flask is simpler, but actually for a beginner, Flask is actually not the way to go. Although it's simpler, the better framework to use for a beginner is Django, because Django's got you covered. You understand? Django is built by some of the best web development developers. It's used it's got everything covered. The security, we talked a little bit about the security. They've got a lot of things covered that you would not think about. So if you're a developer, a new developer, a beginner, and you're doing a web app, you might not think about, oh, I need for the login to make sure that I have password security settings, that I'm checking every time somebody's entering a password when they're creating a profile, that the password matches these requirements. It is long enough, it is complex enough. As a new developer, you might not even think about this. Even if you think about this, you might not even know how to code this, all right? And you might leave it out, and you might not do it, all right, because you just don't know how to do it. Or you might not even know that you had to do it, so you don't know what you don't know. And then you end up not doing it, and then your app is less secure. Whereas if you use Django on the other side, you don't have to know these things. Django is doing them for you in the backend. When we wrote our app, we never wrote code to process the password and check for the security. We didn't write all of that, but it's there in the Django backend. When I entered a less secure password, it prompted me immediately. Actually, it came in as an error. It doesn't even allow you to do that. It comes in as a form error. It tells you cannot use a password like that. Your password has to be long like this. That's written into Django. Another one is processing forms in your CSRF token. Those kind of things are included built into Django. Inside of Flask, they are not there. You must code all of that yourself. Decorators, you must code all of that yourself inside of Django. They're not included. Even, password required or login required decorator. Inside of Django, it's built in. Inside of Python or Flask, you have to write that decorator. You literally have to code that decorator yourself, and so that and then put it on top of the function. Okay, and and you need to know that you need to and you need to know how to write that decorator. So if you coded that decorator with loopholes and somebody could bypass that decorator, you wouldn't know. Okay, and that's what I'm saying. If for developers, for beginners, I wouldn't recommend beginners use Flask. I would actually recommend beginners use a Django, so you can learn all these things, because after a while you will learn these things and then you will know. And then when you want to now become a little bit more specialized, and now I want to use MongoDB, I don't want to use SQL, then you can start to be like, okay, now you can be a little bit fancy. Now you know what you didn't know, and you know how to do all these other things, and then you can sort of plug and play and write the way that you want to do it. Maybe you want to even use Google's Firebase database, because maybe you want to do a mobile app as well, okay, of the same data set. Because I've done those kind of applications as well, where you want to have one database data set sitting somewhere in a cloud. So you want a cloud database, all right? And then you want to build applications, a web app, a mobile app, a desktop app. You want to, and they're all talking to that database. Okay, you can't do such a thing with Django, for example. Flask is useful for that, because you're only then going to focus on doing the routing, the views files, and not worry about the database files. You code the database somewhere else, and then maybe you speak to the database via an API or something like that. Okay, so when you're more advanced and you know how things work, and you want to be able to have a little bit more flexibility in your coding and how you are doing things, that's where you want to use something like Flask. All right, so let's continue with that, and there's more reading for you. Okay, this is high level what I've given you, getting ready for like a Python Django interview, but you can go read a little bit more about Django. There's a lot of books, and I'm gonna link this. Maybe I'll put these links inside here, or maybe I won't. But I'll make this presentation available in our web development to a course of Scholar Online website. I will make this available, but I won't make it available on YouTube, because I don't want to put this Amazon links on my YouTube, because sometimes they get flagged. All right, then so our next Django project. Okay, so I've been thinking about this, and if you guys have some recommendations, what Django project you want to work on, you want us to work on, don't tell me a blogging app, all right? But something a little bit more challenging, something interesting, like, for example, a multi-vendor online store. Okay, online e-commerce store with Django. I think that's I've been thinking about that for a while, to create a project for YouTube for that, and for Scholar Online, something like a YouTube, YouTube clone, so think about interesting projects and that you want us to do here on Scholar Online. Let me know, okay? Let me know in the comments below. But like I said, don't tell me about a blogging app, okay? Tell me about something really interesting and challenging that you can build, because we're here to help you get professional level skills, okay? And it's not going to help you just knowing how to do a blogging app. You gotta know how to do the complex stuff, because in the real world, that's what's gonna be required of you, okay? So guys, thank you for watching, and I think with our next project, I will announce it next week, what we're gonna do. It's most likely going to be the online store and how to do e-commerce with Django, right? Because you get this a lot, and there's so many people that will come to me and they want to do a multi-vendor online store, and they want to do it with WordPress, and I'll be looking at them as, you want to be paying a lot of people, like white label, sites to do, to sort of copy and paste their coding, because people have done this, and then they charge you for the licensing, and the licensing itself is expensive, and if you're not making money, but did you know you can actually just write this yourself in Django, and that's what we're going to do. All right, so thank you guys for watching, and see you guys again next week.